Okay, so we left off last time on page 257. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So I think we'll finish chapter 11 today, and chapter 12 is a short chapter too, so I think we might be able to make some more progress today.
Do we
So
know what we're doing after Judges?
the book of Samuel comes next. Gesundheit. So, Gesundheit. So, so Samuel, that's
That's a good one.
it's a good one. Yes, yes. Okay. Vayavo yiftach. Here's Leon. Just a second. Okay. So we're on page 257, chapter 11, verse 34. Vayavo yiftach hamitzpah el beito, v'hine vito yotzet likrato, bitupim uvim cholot, v'rak hi yechida, ein lo mimenu ben ovat. Let me just read all the verses and then I'll translate. Vayehi chir oto ota, vayikra et begadav, vayomer, aha viti hachreya hichratini, va'at hayit beochrai, va'anochi patsiti fi el Adonai, velo uchal lashuv. Vatomer elav avi, fatzita et picha el Adonai, aseli ka'asher yatsa mipicha, acharei asher asalacha Adonai nekamot me'oivecha mibnei Amon. Vatomer el aviha, ye'aseh li hadavar hazeh, harpe mimeni shnayim chadashim, ve'elcha ve'yaradati al heharim, ve'efke al betulai anochi v'rei otai. Vayomer lechi, vayishlach ota shnei chodashim, vatelechi v'rei oteha, vatefk al betuleha al heharim. Vayehi miketz shnayim chodashim, vatashov el aviha, vaya'as la et nidro asher nadar, vehi lo yad'a ish, vatehi chok b'Yisrael. Miyamim yamima telachna benot Yisrael letanot levat yiftach hagiladi arba'at yamim bashana. Okay, so translating this section. Remember that Jephthah had made a vow, Yiftach made a vow, that if he beat the Ammonites, then the first creature that would come out to meet him when he returned home, he would offer as a burnt offering to God. Okay, so I just read 34 to 40 in chapter 11, 257, now translating it. So Yiftach came to Mitzpah, to his home, and behold, his daughter came out to greet him with drums and dancing, or timbrels and dancing. And only he, by her, and she was the only child. He doesn't have a son or a daughter. Okay, so just she's his only child, and it was when he kir ota, right, when he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, aha. So aha in Hebrew is alas, or woe is me. My daughter, you have brought me very low. like it's her fault that she came out first. It's not his fault that he made the vow. It's her fault. She came. You've made me very low, and you have become my troubler. Like now I'm screwed because you're the one who came out to greet me, and I have patsiti pi el Adonai, like I opened my mouth, but it's more than just opening my mouth. I like put my foot in my mouth. It's that kind of opening my mouth. I open my mouth to God, and I can't take it back. 36, she said to him, my father, you stuck your foot in your mouth. You opened your mouth to God. Do to me whatever came out of your mouth. Yeah, you said it. You have no choice, and I'm willing to go along with whatever you said. So because God did for you by taking revenge on your enemies from the people of Ammon. Like God did for you, so I'll go along with whatever you said to God. 37, and she said to her father, let this be done for me. Leave me alone for 2 months, and I'll go to the mountains. I'll go down on the mountains, which usually it means I should go up to the mountain. But the word is here, I'll go down to the mountains, and I'll weep over my virginity, me and my companions. So she's asking for 2 months to mourn her condition. Now, it's ambiguous on purpose. Like, does she understand that she's going to be offered as a sacrifice? What does she understand, and what has he told her? So it's unclear. So he said, 38, he said, go, and he sent her away for 2 months, and she and her friends went, and she cried over her virginity on the mountains. 39, yes.
So the story of Abraham and Isaac, which is obviously a much older story than this.
Yeah.
It's one of our ancient from
Yeah.
Genesis. Even if this book was out of context and may have been written earlier than some of the other books, is there any? I mean, that the one of the lessons we get from that story is we don't do human sacrifices, even
Correct.
to God. And is there any specific commandment or prohibition against a human sacrifice elsewhere?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, it's in the Torah.
it
Tell
isn't.
me.
I mean,
Oh, yeah, it's
like-
in. It's not in this week's portion, but it's in a portion that we either last week or the week before. Not to offer up your child as a sacrifice to Molech, and Molech was the god
the
of
Canaanite.
child sacrifices.
Okay. So clearly, there's a lesson here about making a pledge that you can't fulfill, but yet he
Right.
does, and
Well,
God
it's
accepts
unclear.
it.
It's unclear what happens.
Okay.
Like, well, it doesn't say specifically ever that he offered her as a sacrifice. It's just that he sent her away for 2 months to do this mourning. And now let's see what happens. 39, at the end of the 2 months, she returned to her father, and he did to her according to his vow that he vowed, and she never knew a man, and it became a law in Israel. So now you're muted, Bess.
No, I know. But the vow was he would give it as a burnt offering.
Yes.
And then here it says he did with her according to his vow.
Right. But then it follows up the last 3 words of that verse. How did he do according to her vow? oh no, the three words before the last, Vehi lo yada ish, and she didn't know a man. So maybe he fulfilled the vow by keeping her celibate.
She had not, well, the translation,
Right, and she had, which he had vowed, and she had not known man, and then it was a custom in Israel. So, but it's yes, you could understand it to mean that she was offered as an offering as a virgin, right? She had never known a man. Or the fulfillment of the vow was that she would never know a man. The word yad'ah in modern Hebrew is past tense, but in biblical Hebrew it could be past tense or it could be future tense.
but it says, I will offer it up for a burnt offering. That's the vow.
That's back on page 257. Yes,
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. On 259, he fulfilled the vow, but he didn't. It doesn't say he offered her as a burnt offering. It could. I'm suggesting, and it's not me. Biblical scholars have argued this point, that it doesn't say specifically that he offered her as a burnt offering. It could say that he adjusted the vow to say, well, she won't, she will be celibate. So I'm just pointing out that the Hebrew is vague. Yes, it says he did to her according to his vow that he vowed, but the fact that it has four more words after that raises the question that maybe he altered the vow. Okay, now, like I said, it could be understood that when he offered her as a burnt offering in fulfillment of the vow, she was a virgin. Or it could mean he fulfilled the vow that he vowed, and she would never know a man. In other words, she's still alive, and she will never know a man.
Almost like her life has to be dedicated to God. That
In a weird way.
in a weird,
Okay?
in a
So
very
in other
weird way.
words,
Yeah.
Samuel is offered up to God. We'll see as a gift for God answering Hannah's prayer. Hannah prayed, if I have a son, I'll dedicate him to God. So, but it doesn't mean that he's not allowed to be married. It's just that he had to be a Nazirite also, I think, besides being dedicated to service to God, living in the sanctuary, being trained by the high priest Eli, and becoming a prophet of Israel. So I don't remember when we get to the book of Samuel, it might say whether he ever married, but I don't think it does, and I'm not sure that he was, but I don't know. But Nazirites are allowed to marry, so maybe there are different rules for men than women. I don't know. So now,
I was going to say, it's very ambiguous. And of
Right.
course, the second explanation would be much easier to take because,
Right.
like Barry said, I mean, I don't know why no one else said, like, you can't do that. Why didn't
That's
everybody
right.
say to Yiftach, you can't do this? This is against our,
Right.
our
You can't,
faith, our,
and it's
beliefs.
true in rabbinic law, you're not allowed to vow a vow that you can't fulfill. Like I say sometimes to people, if they, let's say, and this has happened a few times over the years, that people will say to me, so-and-so in my family wants to be cremated. I say it goes against Jewish law, and it's up to you whether you want to fulfill that agreement or not. Because just like you can't put in a will that you want to have anything that violates American law, you can't put that in a will to say that your child or whoever needs to violate American law in fulfillment of the will. It's just not, you just can't do that. Same thing about Jewish law. So theoretically, if a family member wants to go against the wishes of whoever in their family and not cremate, there could be basis for that. But so I'm just saying, in rabbinic law, you can't vow a vow that can't be legally fulfilled. So so he vowed that this would be what creature would come out would be a burnt offering. And so since it was his daughter, clearly he's not allowed to do that. And maybe this is the substitute. That instead of offering her as a burnt offering, she would essentially, what would happen would be in effect the same way. If he kills her by sacrifice, then she has no descendants. If he doesn't kill her but forces her to be celibate, she has no descendants. So the effect is the same. Yes, Bess.
Then she's breaking the rule, be fruitful and multiply.
It's actually, to be technical about it,
Only for
it's
men,
a
right?
rule that men have to fulfill, not women. Now, it just so happens they need to be married in order to do it, but it's a mitzvah for men to fulfill, not women. That's, like I said, technically. So when we talk, understand as non-Orthodox, understanding all these laws and commandments to be egalitarian, I would agree that it's a commandment that a married couple needs to fulfill together. But technically, according to reading the law in gender terms, it's a law that only a man fulfills.
Also, he clearly didn't expect that when he made that vow that it would be a loved one, his daughter. I mean, he clearly expected it to be an animal, which is.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, it just seems like the lesson is to watch your words.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. But there could be, I'm sure I think there's a lot of midrash about this as to actually what happened. So how does this become a custom or a law in Israel? I don't know why it's
A law.
translated as custom, because
Right, isn't it like chok? Yeah, it's like a
chok is a
statute,
law.
right?
Right,
Very
right.
strong.
So this what about this becomes a statute in Israel? So verse 40, miyamim yamima, for a long time, daughters of Israel would go to lament the daughter of Yiftach, the Gileadite, 4 days in the year. So what are they lamenting? Are they lamenting that she actually was killed, or are they lamenting that she became celibate? And 4 days in the year, is it 4 days in a row? Like what kind of, like, clearly it's not something that's maintained in the Jewish calendar. So what is this? Okay, so, and that's the end of this part of the story. Well, we have a few more, chapter 12 is a little bit more about Yiftach, and then the next Judges, but that's it about this. So let's look at the commentary here, and then we'll look at Alter on this. So back to 257 on the bottom right, with timbrels and with dances, as was usual with women after a victory. So that's Miriam and the women of Israel after the Song of the Sea. We have exactly these same words, Miriam and the women with tupim and mecholot, with timbrels and dancing, also celebrated the sea. And then 1 Samuel 18:6 might be about the return, David returning the ark from the Philistines to Jerusalem. It might be that, but it doesn't matter. It's just another verse that the commentary is saying is about women dancing and playing the timbrels. Only child, as explained below, she was actually his only child. Now, this could also be a corollary, like Barry brought out, to the Abraham and Isaac story, because Isaac's an only son to Sarah, not only son to Abraham, because he had Ishmael also, but still, it's a father and only child, and here's a father and only child. And so in the Abraham-Isaac story, God's the one doing the commanding, and here, Yiftach is the one making the vow. God had nothing to do with this. Okay, Beside her, that is, she's an only child. The literal meaning of the text is from him. Kimchi conjectures that Yiftach was married to a widow with children whom he had adopted as his own, but that from himself he had only this daughter. So in other words, maybe Yiftach had other children, but this was other children that were brought into a marriage, but this is his only biological child. Malbim explains that even the maiden was his stepdaughter, and he was childless. The text is to be understood from himself. He had neither son or daughter. So the Hebrew is hard, and that's why the commentaries are suggesting that maybe she wasn't even his biological daughter. Why that matters, I don't know, but maybe it matters in that he would be more willing or not as upset about fulfilling the vow then with a child who's not his biological child. I don't know. 258, rent his clothes, a mark of grief, Genesis 37, 2 Samuel, Job. Rending the garments is still practiced by Jews as a sign of bereavement. Brought me very low, perhaps better, struck me down, literally caused me to kneel, figuratively took the strength out of my legs so that I am forced to my knees. Thou art become, in the text, thou is emphatic, thou of all people. I cannot go back. Kimchi remarks that legally the vow is invalid and could have been annulled. The Midrash Rabbah on Leviticus relates that he should have gone to Pinchas, or the high priest should have gone to him and had the vow annulled. Each stood on his dignity and waited for the other to take action, and between the obstinacy of the two, the maiden suffered. Both were punished. The divine presence departed from Pinchas, and leprosy struck Yiftach. Okay, making that up. We don't know anything about that. Although the nature of the vow had not been told to her, she felt instinctively that it seriously involved her. This she gathered from the words of Yiftach, I have opened my mouth unto the Lord, and the anguish evident in his voice and the expression on his face. My father, in her innocence, she does not believe that there is any way out of her predicament. She surrenders herself to God's will and harms Yiftach even more by requesting only 2 months. For as much as the Lord has taken vengeance, both of them think that since this came about, it's definitely God's will that accompanied him in battle, that he fulfill his vow. Do unto me, etc. The words make it evident that a dreadful fate was in store for her. What exactly it was is not told. Expositors differ on the point, but that she became a human sacrifice is by no means certain. The Israelite ethical code was strictly opposed to it, yet according to the Talmud and other rabbinic sources, including the Targum, that is the Aramaic translation, she was indeed sacrificed. As mentioned above, Yiftach and Pinchas were at fault. Okay, so depending on the rabbinic sources and how old the rabbinic source is. So like the Aramaic translation is one of the older sources of Midrash. And then later sources from the time of the Talmud or even later, perhaps suggesting that he did not sacrifice her. Okay, 259. Go down, the Jewish commentators see in the verb in such a connection in the sense of weeping. So going down to the mountain would be weeping. Upon the mountains, to be in seclusion. Virginity, to die childless, was a source of grief and reproach among most nations of old. According to his vow, a veil is drawn over the final scene. Yiftach is said to have built a house for her in which she lived a solitary life until she died. It was a custom in Israel. Some commentators prefer to take the noun chok in its literal sense of statute and explain that a decree was ordained making the deed illegal for the future. Others join the clause with the next verse. And that's what our English translation does. It has a comma after the word Israel before the verse 40 starts. And then the comment on 40, lament. In verse 11, the verb is rendered rehearse. The meaning may be that they celebrated her heroic self-sacrifice in song. Okay, let's see what Alter says about all this. So we're on page 169 in Alter, 34. And look, as repeatedly used elsewhere, the presentative term marks the switch to the visual point of view of the character. With timbrels and with dances, it was the role of young women to celebrate the victory in this fashion. The dance of joy will immediately turn into lamentation. My daughter, this is an affectionate form of address like child. For I myself have opened my mouth to the Lord. The Hebrew incorporates a crucial pun. Yiftach's name, Yiftach, means he opens. The verb used here, patzah, is slightly different from the verb patach, on which the name is based, but it is a close phonetic and semantic cousin. The belief shared by father and daughter is that vows to God are irrevocable and non-negotiable. What comes out of the mouth cannot be brought back. I cannot turn back, a locution heavy with ironic resonances in light of Yiftach's attempt to come back to the house from which he was driven. Do to me as it came out from your mouth. Neither she nor her father can bring themselves to mention explicitly the horrific content of the vow. She speaks almost as though the vow were an autonomous agent that came out of her father's mouth and cannot be called back. And she said to her father, this is one of the most interesting instances of the convention of repeating the formula for the introduction of speech with no intervening answer in order to indicate a difficulty in responding on the part of the interlocutor in the dialogue. Yiftach, hearing his daughter's declaration that she's willing to become a burnt offering in fulfillment of the vow, is dumbfounded and doesn't know what to say. His daughter then goes on to add her special request to the affirmation of compliance she has just uttered. Weep. The Hebrew verb viyaradati, in the form in which it appears, would normally mean, and I shall go down. But going down upon mountains doesn't make much sense. The least strained solution is to assume it is a scrambling of arid, which in Psalm 55 is a verb associated with weeping or complaint. Another possibility is to link the term here with the rare verbal stem resh vav dalid, which probably means something like wander. Okay, 38 on 171, and he said, go. Yiftach's extreme brevity of response suggests a man choked with emotion, barely able to speak. Her and her companions, here and in the previous verse, it is unambiguous in the Hebrew that the companions are female, nubile young women like Yiftach's daughter. We actually don't know how old she is. And she was singing and dancing, but how old was she doing that? Was she 8? Was she 12? Was she 16? We don't know. So Alter is suggesting nubile young woman. 39, he did to her as he had vowed. The narrator, like father and daughter in the dialogue, avoids spelling out the terrible act of child sacrifice. This whole story has parallels elsewhere in the ancient Mediterranean world, the most obvious being Agamemnon's sacrifice of his daughter Iphigenia in order to obtain favorable winds to sail to the Trojan War. The parallel episode within the Bible is the binding of Isaac, but here, in contrast to Genesis 22, the ending is tragic. And she had known no man. The concluding note about her virginity underscores the point of keening for her maidenhood. she is cut off from the living without ever having had the opportunity to enjoy the fulfillment that life has in store for women. Each year, the daughters of Israel would go to lament the daughter of Yiftach. The long-standing scholarly hypothesis that this is an etiological tale to explain an annual ritual. In other words, you have the ritual first, and then you need a story you need to make up a story to figure out why we have the ritual. So that's what etiological means. You come up with a story for like the Garden of Eden story. Why is it that snakes slither on the ground? Because the snake in the Garden of Eden had legs, and as punishment for enticing Eve to eat the apple or the fruit, the snake was punished. Okay, so which came first, the Garden of Eden or that snake slither? Right, so and why do women have pain in childbirth? Because of eating the fruit in the Garden of Eden. So again, you got a story to explain something that is current, is what's going on. So, okay, so that's what the technical term etiology is. One suspects a pagan practice in which young women go off to mourn the descent into the underworld each year of a vegetation goddess, a virgin like themselves, roughly analogous to the Greek Persephone and to the Mesopotamian male vegetation god Tammuz. Okay, so lots of things going on. And just to say that the ambiguity in the text leads to a variety of interpretations.
So you're saying there was already the ritual of going 4 days?
There's some
To
kind of
cry?
pagan ritual
Oh,
that
pagan
they're
ritual.
suggesting, and this is the story that was created to explain the ritual. What was the ritual? He's suggesting something about a vegetation goddess
God.
who's a virgin. Who knows? Who knows? Bess, were you trying to say something? No, Barry.
Could you remind me why the name change? Why he has two different names?
Who?
Jeff.
Yiftach?
Yeah.
I don't think he's the one with two different names. I think it
Well,
was somebody else.
I mean, the text says Jephthah, but you call him.
Yiftach is Hebrew, so however you pronounce Hebrew in English, so Jephthah, it's like Jethro instead of Yitro, so it's the same name. It's just how in English it's like my name. It's Yonah in Hebrew, but Jonah in English. So Y becomes J.
Because there's no J in the Hebrew language.
There's no J in the Hebrew
Right.
language, but maybe J in Latin. Like sometimes J in Spanish is pronounced Y. Okay, so maybe somewhere back there, the J was meant to be the Y letter. Anyway, whatever. And then also the letter Tuf in his name is TH. So Jephthah is it's just how the Hebrew is written in English. It's the same name. Okay, so let's go on to chapter 12. And let's see if we can read the whole chapter. Vayitzaek ish Ephraim, vayavor tzafona, vayomru leyiftach, madua avarta lehilachem bivnei Ammon, velanu lo karata lalechet imach, beitcha nisrof alecha ba'esh. So the people of Ephraim cried out. So it says It says they gathered together. I translate vayitzaek. Okay, so it's a different form of the word. So it should be vayitzak if it was to cry out or yell. Vayitzaek is being translated here as they gathered together and passed. I would have translated it northward, but they're translating it as the town of Tzafon. And they said to Yiftach, how come you passed us by to fight against the Ammonites and he didn't call us to go with you? We'll burn your house upon you with fire. Like, okay, what's their argument? And 2, Vayomer Yiftach Alehem, Ish Riv Hayiti Ani Va'ami Uvnei Amon Ma'od Va'ezak etchem V'lo hoshatem oti mi'adam. Yiftach said to them, I and my people were at great strife with the people of Ammon, and I did call to you, but you didn't answer, or you didn't save me from their hands. So Ephraim thinks that Yiftach insulted them by not asking them to join in the fight. And Yiftach said, I was busy, and I also called to you, and you didn't answer. 3, Va'er'eh ki eincha Moshia, va'asima nafshi bechapi ve'ebra el b'nei Ammon, va'yitneim Adonai biyadi, ve'lama alitem elai hayom hazeh lehilachem bi. And I saw that you're not coming to help me or to save me, and I put my life in my hand, and I went to the Ammonites, and God gave them in my hand. Like I won, and I was able to be triumphant. So why are you coming up to me today to fight against me? 4, Vayikbotz Yiftach et kol anshe Gilad, Vayilachem et Ephraim, Vayaku anshe Gilad et Ephraim, Ki amru plitei Ephraim atem, Gilad betoch Ephraim betoch Menashe. So Yiftach gathered together the people of Gilead, and they fought the Ephraimites, and they smote the people of Gilead smote the Ephraimites because they said, you are fugitives from Ephraim, you Gileadites, in the midst of Ephraim and in the midst of Menashe. So in other words, some kind of civil war is going on here between the Gileadites, who might be Ephraimites, and other Ephraimites. So that could be the issue. Like, how come this part of the Ephraimites were able to defeat the Ammonites, and how come you didn't call us to join you? So 5, Vayilkod Gilad et ma berot hayarden leEphraim, v'haya ki yomru plitei Ephraim e'evora vayomru lo anshe Gilad ha'ephrati ata vayomer lo. So the Gileadites took the crossings of the Jordan against the Ephraimites. And when the fugitives of Ephraim said, let's go over, we want to go over these crossings, but Yiftach had them, they said to him, the men of Gilead said to him, are you an Ephraimite? And he said, no. Vayomru lo, emorna shibolet, vayomer sibolet, velo yachin ledaber kain, vayochazu oto, vayishchatuhu el ma berot hayarden, vayipol ba'etahi me'Ephraim arba'im u'shnayim aleph. So, he said he wasn't an Ephraimite. So, verse 6, they said to him, say the word shibolet. And he said, sibolet. So, in other words, an Ephraimite dialect of Hebrew, they don't pronounce the SH. This is similar, by the way. Excuse me, let me just get a drink of water. I'll be right back.
We say shit, we say with the SH sound, right? When we use the word like a slogan or a, right?
Yes, so it is the SH sound, and there are like Galicianers, Jews from Galicia have the same thing. I think they say good Sabbath, and they don't do it. They don't have an SH. I don't know why. That's just the way it was taught. So in other words, Ephraimites don't have the shin. They only have the sin. But our Hebrew text makes it the letter samach instead of the letter sin to make it clearer, I think, what's going on here. So they test the guy, say the word shibolet, and he says sibolet, and for he could not frame to pronounce it right. In other words, he couldn't say shibolet, he said sibolet, and they took him and they slaughtered him on the crossings of the Jordan, and at that time they killed 40,000 Ephraimites, 42,000
2,000.
Ephraimites. Yeah, 42,000.
So what, because they're not real? They thought they were traitors? What is,
Right, exactly. This guy wanted to cross, and he was lying when the Gileadite said, "Are you an Ephraimite?" He said no, but then he didn't pass the test. He said Sibolet instead of Shibolet, just like the Ephraimites pronounce Hebrew, and so they killed the Ephraimites.
They didn't have uniforms. They got these two forces fighting each other.
Right?
No uniforms.
I don't know, Bess.
Okay.
I don't know how they told the difference. I really don't. Vayishpot Yiftach et Yisrael shesh shanim, vayamat Yiftach hagiladi vayikaver be'arei Gilad. So Yiftach judged Israel for 6 years. Yiftach the Gileadite died, and he was buried in the cities of Gilad. Vayishpot acharav et Yisrael Ivtzan mi Beit Lachem. So the next one to judge Israel was Ivtzan from Bethlehem. Vayehi lo shloshim banim ushloshim banot shilach hachutza ushloshim banot hevi levanav min hachutz vayishpot et Yisrael sheva shanim. And I'll do verse 10 too. Vayamat Ivtzan vayikaver beveit lachem. So Ivtzan had 30 sons and 30 daughters. He sent abroad, and 30 daughters, 30 women, he brought for his sons from abroad, and he judged Israel for 7 years. And Ivtzan died, and he was buried in Bethlehem. Vayishpot acharav et Yisrael Elon hazvuloni, vayishpot et Yisrael 10 shanim, vayamat Elon hazvuloni, vayikaver ba'ayalon be'eretz Zvulun. And Elon the Zebulunite judged Israel after him, and he judged Israel for 10 years. And Elon the Zebulunite died and was buried in Ayalon in the land of Zvulun.
And he started up an electric car company.
Right, that's right. Vayishpot acharav et Yisrael Avdon ben Hillel hapir atoni. Vayehi lo arba'im banim ushloshim b'nei banim rochavim al shiv'im ayarim Vayishpot et Yisrael shmone shanim, vayamad Avdon ben Hillel hapir atoni, vayikaver bepir aton be'eretz Ephraim bahar ha'amaleki. And after him, Avdon, son of Hillel, the Piratonite. I have no idea where Piraton is, and why he's not defined by his tribe. And he had 40 sons and 30 grandsons, riding on 70 donkeys, and he judged Israel for 8 years. And Avdon, son of Hillel, the Piratonite, died and was buried in Piraton in the land of Ephraim in the hill country of the Amalekites. Okay, so let's read the commentary on this. So back to 259. The men of Ephraim were gathered together. As the Ephraimites resented Gideon's action in ignoring them when he fought against Midian, see chapter 8, they were similarly offended that Yiftach took the field against Ammon without asking for their aid. Gideon and Yiftach were of different temperament. The former appeased them, the latter took stern action. And were gathered together indicates that their intention was hostile, since the meaning is were mustered. 260, passed, better, crossed the Jordan. Saphon, a place in the Jordan Valley near Sukkot on the east side of the river. The Palestinian Talmud identifies it with Amatus, the modern Amateh, north of the Yabok. Some commentators translate the word northward and explain that after crossing the Jordan, they turned north into Gilead. Didst not call us, regarding themselves as the most powerful of the tribes, the Ephraimites interpreted Yiftach's neglect of them as a deliberate slight. We will burn thy house. For a similar threat, see chapter 14. I and my people were at great strife. Literally, a man of strife was I, and my people and the children of Ammon very much. The Hebrew is awkward, but may represent the unpolished language of a warrior like Yiftach. What he evidently meant was that he and his people were in dire straits because of Ammon's aggressiveness. When I called you, this is not recorded, and the Jewish commentators understand the statement as an additional piece of information. The course of events was, they suppose, during Yiftach's stay in the land of Tov, he was plagued constantly by the Ammonites. He turned in vain to the Ephraimites for help. Others conjecture that during the 18 years of Ammonite oppression, the Gileadites had turned to the Ephraimites for help many times, but in vain. Now that war was inevitable, he recruited those tribes upon whom he felt he could rely. The Lord delivered them into my hand. He disclaimed the victory as due to his generalship. It was God's doing. Therefore, the hostility of the Ephraimites toward him personally was unjustified. Gathered together, it is to be deduced that Yiftach's army had been disbanded and was now recalled to meet this new danger from within. Because they said, etc., the words spoken were obviously a cutting taunt on the part of the Ephraimites, which the men of Gilead deeply resented. The precise meaning of the phraseology is difficult to determine. Ye are fugitives, etc. Modern expositors abandon the attempt to interpret the passage. Based on the Targum, Jewish commentators explain, you Gileadites, who think yourselves to be brave soldiers, are comparable with the most despicable of the Ephraimites who desert in a time of war, to be found in the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. Took the fords to cut off the retreat of the fleeing Ephraimites. The fugitives of Ephraim, the phrase used by the Ephraimites in the previous verse, with contempt now became applicable to them. Shibolet, the noun has two meanings, namely ear of corn and flood of a stream. The latter was more probably in the questioner's mind, since the locality was the ford of the river. Rashi thinks the fugitives were asked to say, let me pass over the flood of the river. Sibolet, the existence of dialectical variations even at that early period among the Israelites is not surprising. Could not frame, the meaning the verb meaning to establish, that is, they could not pronounce it correctly. 40 and 2000, the Ephraimites had been taught a sharp lesson, and in the subsequent history, we do not again hear of their arrogant claims. One of the cities of, 262, the text has in the cities of, the Midrash explains that he was stricken with leprosy as punishment. His death was lingering, and he lost his limbs one by one, as in elephantiasis, in the course of his movements through the land. They were buried where they happened to drop off. So in other words, the Hebrew says he was buried in the cities of Gilead. How could he be buried in more than one city? So the Midrash comes up with the story that he was afflicted with leprosy and it caused his limbs to fall off. And each limb was buried where it fell. And that's why he was buried. Technically speaking, his body is buried in different places. Parts of his body are buried in different places. Ralbag maintains the parts of his body were, at his request, buried in different cities where he had achieved the victories against the Ammonites. His purpose was to leave behind him a memorial of his deeds, seeing that he had no children to perpetuate his memory. Right? The daughter was his only one, and she's celibate or she's dead. Ivtsan, the name occurs only in this passage. Rabbinic tradition identifies him with Boaz. Beit Lechem, Josephus places it in Judah. Modern commentators prefer to locate it without proof in Zebulun and equate it with the village of Beit Lechem, about 7 miles northwest of Nazareth. So that's interesting. There's a debate as to that. Therefore, there's a debate about where is Bethlehem. Bethlehem today, where Jesus was, is just south of Jerusalem, and it's where Rachel is buried. So, just outside of Bethlehem. So, that's the town. I didn't know about another town near Nazareth, but again, Jesus was in Nazareth also. So I don't know. Sent abroad in marriage with men of other tribes. Brought in as wives for his sons. It's perhaps to be understood that he adopted this policy to extend his influence over a wide area. Judged, probably in a civil capacity only, the decisive victory of Yiftach secured a lengthy period of peace. Elon, the name occurs as a son of Zebulun. Ayalon, the Hebrew consonants are identical with the name Elon. The place is distinct from the Ayalon in Dan. And Avdon, 263, the name is found in the genealogical list of Benjamin in 1 Chronicles. Hillel, only here in the Bible. It was later the name of 2 famous rabbis. Piratonite. Piraton in Ephraim was the home of one of David's heroes. It is generally identified with Ferata, 6 miles south of Shechem. Rode on ass colts, a sign of wealth and rank. Hill country of the Amalekites, the name of the Amalekites may have come to be associated with the district as the result of an intrusion and temporary occupation, or because of an early settlement. All right, let's look at altar on chapter 12. Page 172, they crossed over. This verb, Hebrew, avar, is a key word in the episode. In their challenge to Yiftach, they will say, "Why did you cross over?" These occurrences prepare the way for the testing of the Ephraimite fugitives who seek to cross over the Jordan at the fords. The Hebrew noun for ford derives from this same verb, avar. We will burn down your house. Yiftach, who was driven from his father's house and whose familial house has been destroyed in the sacrifice of his daughter, is now threatened with the destruction of his physical house. I and my people were in strife, and the Ammonites sorely afflicted me. The received text is syntactically distorted here, reading, I and my people were in strife with the Ammonites very. The translation adopts a reading attested in several versions of the Septuagint, which appear to have used a Hebrew text that had one additional word, inuni, they afflicted me, before very or very much. Ephraim's fugitives had said, "You, Gilead, are in the midst of Ephraim, in the midst of Manasseh." The obscure wording here has given rise to conflicting interpretations. The one followed in this translation is Rashi's proposal. Even the least important, the fugitives of Ephraim, tell the Gileadites that they are no more than a tolerated presence in the midst of Ephraim and its brother tribe Manasseh. In the denouement of the civil war, all the Ephraimite warriors will become fugitives to be slaughtered at the fords of the Jordan. Shibboleth, Siboleth. In contrast to the English use of shibboleth, here it is a password. The necessary inference is that in the dialect of Hebrew spoken by the Ephraimites, SH was pronounced as S. The Hebrew word can mean either stream or stalk of grain, but given the proximity to the Jordan, the former sense is more likely. One might note that what comes out of the mouth of the fugitives leads to death, as was the case with Yiftach's vow. 42,000, as with numbers elsewhere, this is hardly realistic. In his town in Gilead, the Masoretic text reads, "in the towns of Gilead," but the Septuagint shows the reading adopted here. Outside, probable meaning is outside the clan. Who rode on 70 donkeys? See the comment to 10:4. And that's it for Altar. Okay, next week, we'll start the story of Samson. And this will be a couple chapters long, so. Okay, so have a good day, everybody, and Shabbat Shalom, and see you all.
Shabbos.
Okay,
See you all next
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you,
Shabbat
Jonah.
And
Shalom.
Shabbos. Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom, and thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.